How are you? Thank you for tuning in to Tamale Mirundi official channels. Tamale Mirundi official, Joseph Tamale Mirundi on Facebook, Instagram and Twitter. Our Twitter handle is at Joseph Mirundi and Instagram is Tamale Mirundi official. On Monday, 25th of November 2015, Joseph Tamale Mirundi wrote a book of how Mbabazi plotted his failed coup. Tonight, we are bringing you this book online on our YouTube channel. Stay tuned. John Patrick Amama Mbabazi, or simply known as Amama Mbabazi, inspired the writing of this book. But before we proceed with the writing, with telling you what is in this book, I come before you to tell you that John Patrick Amama Mbabazi has served in different capacities of the government, was one of Museveni's biggest darlings, political darlings, but they fell out. In this book, Tamale Mirundi details how Mbabazi wanted to overthrow Museveni, how Mbabazi wanted to overthrow his boss, what brought Mbabazi to have feelings that he can lead the country, what came out of his feelings, and how he came out from the open, to challenge his biggest boss ever. Mbabazi was once tagged as a prime minister, but still little is known of how he fell out with President Museveni. Before we start, I need to give you a simple background of John Patrick Amama Mbabazi. Then we proceed with reading this book written in 2013, titled How Mbabazi Plotted His Failed Coup, or How Mbabazi Tried to Overthrow His Boss, but he failed. John Patrick Amama Mbabazi, commonly known as Amama, was born on the 16th day of January 1949. He is a Ugandan politician who also served as the 9th Prime Minister of Uganda from 24th May 2011 to 19th September 2014. He played an important role in the Uganda's protracted liberation struggle from several tyrannic governments. That means John Patrick Amama Mbabazi started politics way back in 1972, 1986. He's one of the founding members of the fathers of the National Resistance Movement, NRM, the ruling party that he wanted to overthrow with his own pressure group go forward. Mbabazi served as a member of parliament for Kinkin's West constituency in Kanungu district, a position he had in 1996 until 2016. He ran unsuccessfully in 2016 against President Yoweri Kaguta Museveni. But before that, who is he in his childhood and how he came to rise to the ranks of almost becoming a president by 2016. John Patrick Amama Mbabazi, or J. Pam, was born in Imparo Village, Ruchiga County, in a present-day district called Kabale District on the 16th day of January. He attended the schools of Kigezi College, Butobero, for his high school education and inter school for his A-level. These were prominent by then. He then earned a Bachelor's of Law from Makerere University, so Mbabazi is a lawyer. He received a postgraduate diploma in legal practice from LDC, Kampala. This is Law Development Center in Kampala. He is also an advocate of the Courts of Judicature of Uganda, and he has been a member of the Uganda Law Society since 1977. That's still the profile of Amama Mbabazi, who tried to overthrow his boss, and we are reading the book of how he did plot to overthrow Museveni. He started his career as a state attorney in the Attorney General's chambers in 1976 and 1978, rising to the position of the Secretary of Uganda Law Council from 1977 to 1979. So between 86 and 92, he served as the head of External Security Organization, ESO, charged with looking at the security threats of Uganda outside our borders. He also served as a Minister of State in the President's office in charge of political affairs, and he became Secretary of the NRM caucus in the Constituent Assembly that drafted the 1995 Ugandan Constitution. Between 86 and 92, he was a Minister of State for Defense. Subsequently, he served as a Minister of State for Regional Cooperation. That was 1998 to 2001. He was Attorney General and Minister of Justice 2004 and 2006. This slot rewarded him a tag of a super minister. I know you know. I know you remember Mbabazi being called or tagged a super minister. He was appointed as a Minister of Defense in 2006, a position he held until he was appointed as a Minister of Security. He served as a Minister of Security from February 2009 until May 2011. That is John Patrick Amama Mbabazi's political career when he was appointed Prime Minister. He was Secretary General of the NRM since 2005 to January 2015. We have interest in telling you the journey of Mbabazi plotting to overthrow his boss Museveni and how he failed. How did he start plotting to fail Museveni? Who did he work with as he wanted to overthrow Museveni? And how did they fall out with his former boss? That is the book we are bringing you today, how Mbabazi plotted his failed coup. Before I go still to the introduction, Mbabazi had his presidential bid after being replaced by Dr. Ruhakana Rugunda, his childhood friend, as a Prime Minister on the 18th date of September 2014 by President Museveni. He was this move of appointing Rugunda as a replacement to Mama Mbabazi was seen by many as Museveni's way of punishing Mbabazi for his rumored presidential run. On the 15th date of June 2015, Mbabazi declared his intentions to run against Yoweri Museveni for the National Resistance Movement nomination for the president at the party's convention on the 4th date of October 2015. That's when Mbabazi wanted to run as the NRM flag bearer from getting the ticket from Museveni. So this is when it started. This is when he came out to show that he wanted to run under the NRM on the party as a party flag bearer. This declaration was followed by a response from President Museveni, who dubbed it as bad conduct and very premature. On the 31st of July, after such a provocation and much disagreement between the top-ranking party officials and Mbabazi himself, the former Prime Minister declared he would stand as an independent candidate. His candidature was backed by the Democratic Alliance. You remember, these guys went to TDA as members of the opposition parties to choose a single candidate to run on the opposition ticket. So they chose Mbabazi to be their representative. This was a loose convergence of minor political parties working to win the position of the presidency. So in 2016 general election, the guy received 1.39% of the vote, placing him as the third in the third position of his presidential bid. We want to know how Mbabazi plotted his failed coup and who did he work with, how did he do it, this diplomat, how did he fall out with President Museveni. He's been a diplomatic guy. His diplomacy, he has always represented Uganda in the international fora, including the United Nations Security Council, where I argued for the international community to allow Uganda's People's Defense Forces, UPDF, to pursue the CONI's rebel movement called the Lord's Resistance Army Fighters into the Republic of Congo. So he's been a diplomat in the country. That is generally Amamba Mbabazi, born of Kabali. Right, by the time now we read this or we bring to you this, is 70 years old. In this book, how Mbabazi plotted his failed coup, we shall detail how we introduced it. I want to tell you that this book was authored by our usual author, Joseph Tamale Mirundi, who was born in 1964 at Matare village in Rakai, the son of John Mirundi and Mrs. Molina Matovu Mirundi. Let me get straight to reading this book. I understand now you appreciate the background of Amama Mbabazi. I don't know whether you were a supporter of Mbabazi during his presidential bid in 2016. I may not know. But my task right now is to straight ahead go and read the book. How Mbabazi plotted his failed coup. He wanted to overthrow Museveni, but he failed. How did he do this? With whom did he plot this? And what are the factors that led you to his failure and getting 1% of the vote? Someone who was representing a full Democratic Alliance, TDA. How did he reach to the extent from a prime minister to someone of 1%? Introduction. How Mbabazi plotted his failed coup. Tamale Mirundi writes, on Monday, October 21st, 2015, government I had earlier made a mistake. I need to correct this mistake. The book was written on Monday, 25th November, 2015. Introduction. On Monday, October 21st, 2015, government recalled Parliament from recess to discuss a new package of political reforms. This is very strange, given the fact that the same government had earlier submitted what it believed was enough to make the elections free and fair. What forced the government to rush back to Parliament, according to reliable sources, is the number of presidential candidates that had rose to 40. If this is true, then I saw it coming. I wondered how the Electoral Commission would hand over nomination papers to an aspiring presidential candidate who went to its offices riding on a border. I was told by the lawyers that this is their right. The law says the Electoral Commission must hand over nomination papers to anybody who collects them. This is the problem that exists between politics and the law. I have always argued elsewhere that some of the political problems Uganda is grappling with arise from the nature of the constitution we have. The constitution is a product of lawyers. Lawyers create jobs for themselves in every document they draft. They also base their arguments on the principle of justice. Politics is not based on justice. Politics is dirty everywhere. It is the level or the concentration of dirtiness that separates states and politics. This features prominently in many provisions of our constitution where a lawyer's hand was involved. How can a president wait for a parliamentary approval to declare war? What if the invading country manipulates your parliament? What if it occurs during holidays where getting a quorum becomes impossible? On the other hand, Americans have a political decision doctrine where the president's decision is not subjected to congressional approval. We are reading how Mbabazi plotted his failed coup. What is needed is not to increase the amount of money that the candidate must pay to the Electoral Commission before nomination. What this can solve is the case of an ordinary candidate who may fail to get the money. In many cases, the candidates this law wants to eliminate are of a different type. Some look at it as a chance to blackmail the serious candidates. For example, President Museveni's main supporters are peasants who can easily be manipulated or confused into voting for another candidate or spoiling the votes. If the president's photo is not on the top or the bottom, if the president's photo is not on the top or bottom, for example, explaining to the peasants who their candidate is on the ballot paper would be extremely difficult if the president's photograph is sandwiched between two candidates. This usually leads to invalidation of votes as peasants struggle to locate his photograph. According to the president's voters, who are predominantly peasants, what clarity? For instance, on top of the ballot or at the bottom of the list. Simple, needless to explain to a peasant that their preferred candidate photograph is between so and so, which becomes difficult because the so and so are not known to them. What ought to be done is to raise the present bar from the simple requirements of education level, age, and citizenship. Obviously, a presidential aspirant must have a permanent residence, a respectable job, and a stable income. We have countries where poor people have been propelled into power, but these are abnormal cases. This mainly happens through revolutions, and Uganda has gone beyond these situations. Much as we need to protect our interests and rights of independence, the strongest pillars of democracy are organized groups and political parties. Politics, like soccer, is a group game. This is demonstrated clearly by the opposition groups in Uganda. They on their own admitted that they can remove the president by forming a single front and came up with TDA. Whether it has worked or failed doesn't matter. They have failed as individuals. Where it has been done, the results are credible people and financial prudence, not individual differences. In Uganda, alliances cannot work because the political landscape is currently different. Uganda still has fresh memories of independence, Kabaka, UPC alliance, and other subsequent alliances. Alliances are businesses. They are based on credibility and financial prudence and trust. This is the introduction of the book, how Mbabazi plotted his failed coup. I know you have heard about how Uganda and the President Museveni and how he's voted and how TDA came about. We are digesting, we are bringing forward this book to explain how Mbabazi, a known diplomat, a super minister, one of the biggest diplomats we have in the country, tried to overthrow Museveni but failed and ended up getting 1%. Chapter 1 of the book, Politics Without Politicians, is the heading. The biggest problem with political science is that the political arena is dominated by non-politicians. Political science is a science like any other science. However, unlike natural scientists that use variables that are not easily manipulated for negative results, political science uses human beings as variables who are not rational. There are also no professional politicians contrary to other scientists. Neither is there anything like professional ethics. What determines politics is the end result. Therefore, in absence of universally agreed professional guidelines and professional ethics, it becomes very difficult to enforce discipline in politics. It is widely believed that politics is a dirty game. This is partly true. However, the level of concentration of dirtiness, in other words, the tricks employed, reflects the level of democracy in the country. There are no agreed principles, although in politics, there is no leveling of the ground. There must be universal benchmarks for one country to qualify to be a true democracy. The ingredients can differ, but the hygienic conditions must be the same anywhere, and politics must be aimed at improving the way of managing a particular society. Whatever type of democracy a country employs, the people's choice through democratic institutions must be maintained and strictly observed. For example, countries world over have adopted the type of democracy that suits their conditions and history. Unlike many African single-party states that they were manipulated by their leaders, Chama cha Mapinduzi in Tanzania under the late Julius Nyerere remained democratic. The only position that could not be contested was the presidency. Challenging a leader under a single-party state was impossible. However, Kenya, KANU, both under Kenyatta and Daniel Arap Moi, was a tool of oppression. Anybody who expressed contrasting views would be denied the KANU party card, and as a result he or she would be sent into a political limbo because forming a new party was impossible and independents were not allowed. Parliamentary democracy. This is applied in many countries, but has not. This is applied in many European countries, but has its roots in the United Kingdom. The party that wins the majority seats in parliament forms the next government. This is the type that Uganda adopted at independence. In such a case, there are no powers for a president because executive powers of a president are vested in the executive prime minister. In case there is no parliamentary democracy, like in Uganda, the role of the prime minister changes from the executive to running of the government as the man in charge on behalf of the president. It helps provide and insulate government, especially in Africa, where tribal interests are protected by tribal kingpins. Presidential system. This is the type that we have in Uganda. We elect our president directly. A presidential candidate can be chosen by the party or can be an independent candidate. What matters is that the people are given freedom to pronounce themselves by choosing the person they want to rule them by giving him their vote through an election. Our opposition politicians distort this by saying that Museveni has imposed himself on the people of Uganda, which is a naked lie. This would apply in case of a single-party state that I have enumerated above. The one the Nyereres and the Kenyattas used in the past. Since no other person could be allowed to challenge them within their political parties and there was no other way of producing a challenger, it means Kenyans and Tanzanians at the time were denied a chance to choose between several candidates. However, this is not the case in Uganda. Uganda's case is like a market where you have different stalls and people are selling on a on the premises of the market like Owino or any other market. If one vendor overcharges you, you are free to move to other stalls. Likewise, anybody who feels he does not want to vote Museveni has other choices. This explains why we have over 40 presidential aspirants. What the opposition means is that since Museveni cannot be defeated by their weak candidates, NRM supporters should help them to remove their candidate who wins and bring a weak candidate whom the opposition will defeat. I have always compared this argument to a village thief who urges the targeted villagers whom he wants to rob to change their strong padlocks that have denied him to break into their houses, and by weak ones he will break. Or a businessman who kills his rival, thinking that the only way of making profits is to kill a competitor. Or you want to be like a weak student who believes that the only way of defeating the brightest student is to deny him examinations instead of reading his books. I conclude on this matter by always citing the Brazilian soccer team that took the World Cup trophy 5 times. Brazil was never excluded from the tournament until recently when it was decisively defeated. What other soccer teams did was to invest in training and experience and defeated Brazil. I provide for how power is acquired. That is what the opposition has to do. And what it has to do is always to field credible candidates and make sure that their manifestos appeal to the voters. Learn why the people have stuck to Museveni for the last 30 years. However, instead of facing these realities, they attribute their defeat to rigging. Term limits. Presidential term limits too have their origin from United States of America. It was in 1956 when the opposition dominated Congress, staged a coup against the then incumbent president, who was sure of winning a third term. The president neither supported it nor opposed it. He allowed it to go through. However, we should understand that it came after almost 400 years after their independence. It was not part of their constitution. This is the most important issue. There is no limit on the number of years one has to live on earth, such that beyond a certain age one does not die. This means that God calls anybody anytime he wants. Why the framers of the American Constitution did not put term limits for the president was that they knew that it would come automatically, since the Constitution provided how power was acquired and relinquished. They saw no need for providing for presidential term limits. No leader can remain in power in a democratic society without the consent of the voters. This means that if a leader misbehaves, there exists channels through which he can be ejected out of power. Secondly, this amendment was made when America had reached a stage of a corporate state where institutions can hold a country together. Belgium remained without a central government for 6 months, and this did not affect its economy because of the strong, supportive institutions. Also, America had developed a high level of good politicians through the established catchment areas such as the governorship. In America, for example, many governors can become presidents, senators, and congressmen and congresswomen. How many of our equivalent here can become presidents in spite of the fact that power was extended to lower levels? Chapter 2. Incumbents also lose power. In order to create fear among our supporters, opposition politicians advance a stupid argument that incumbents do not lose power. That in absence of term limits, a good leader can become a dictator. This is not true. We have many cases to disprove the argument. For example, Joseph Estrada in the Philippines was successfully impeached by Congress and replaced with his deputy, Mrs. Arroyo. In Africa, we also have cases where entrenched incumbents lost elections. In Senegal, veteran politician Wade lost to his former Prime Minister Sali in a hotly contested election. This was because, unlike Uganda's opposition politicians, Sali disagreed with Wade on principle. In Malawi, Engwanzi, the Lion, Dr. Kamuzu Banda, who presided over an entrenched dictatorship, was trounced by little-known Bakiri Muluzi in Zambia. Dr. Kenneth Kaunda was trounced by Frederick Chiruba in spite of persistent accusations that he was a Congolese. When Chiruba tried to entrench himself in power, he was forced out by the people. This is because a leader cannot impose himself on the people after losing the people's confidence and support. Why has Museveni clocked 30 years in power? We are reading this book authored by Joseph Tamale Mirundi on how Mbabazi plotted his failed coup. I gave you the profile of Right Honorable Mama Mbabazi, his political career, his education, and how he's been a diplomat for the country for quite some time. How did he plan to overthrow Museveni, and how did he end him in getting 1%? So thank you for listening in. We still continue with Joseph Tamale Mirundi chapter. This was chapter 2, and we shall continue at why Museveni has clocked 30 years in power, on our book How Mbabazi plotted his failed coup. Tune in to Joseph Tamale Mirundi on Facebook, Tamale Mirundi Official on YouTube, as well as Twitter and Instagram. We are all there. Thank you for now. Catch you then as we still continue with this book of Joseph Tamale Mirundi, How Mbabazi plotted his failed coup.